dodged a bullet as Rating Agency Moody's announced it's not going to change South Africa's credit rating just yet, but analysts do warn that a downgrade could still happen. To help us unpack the impact of this, I'm now joined in studio by a research fellow at the trade collective Lebohang Pheko. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, so some people say it was a stay of execution and that the execution is likely still to happen. What's your take on what happened over the weekend?
Yeah, so I agree. I suppose that we can never really be completely comfortable. What I suspect happened is that Moody's in particular, in this instance, may have looked at the background narrative. They may have examined that, for example, the MPC announcement of the day before was fairly favorable, because what that means is that a lot of business is going to be able to borrow with very little interest. It also means then that in theory that businesses can then trade and transact without incurring too many external costs. It also means that the cost of importing and exporting remains fairly stable, and these are things that are fairly important in a macroeconomic framework, because it means that the cost of goods, basic goods and services for us as consumers, will remain relatively unchanged for the next while.
All right, so you say that, and those optics sound good. The Democratic Alliance is saying that they're concerned because what they're saying is that this delay, all it does is generate more uncertainty, and that uncertainty is what investors don't want to see. So it might not be helping us, actually, if we balance the two. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so look, I have a particular view on the ways in which we should be measuring the health of our economy. And I think that we do we are overly reliant, and over the last few years have become extremely reliant on the opinions of the ratings agencies, which are external bodies. And I'm not very happy about that, because, I mean, they have proved in the past not to be without fault. I mean, they didn't pick up on the 2008 meltdown. I mean, there's several things that they haven't. They didn't pick up on Enron in '97. So there's several things that they haven't necessarily picked up on. But we've chosen to use them as a bellwether of everything that's right or wrong with our economic fundamentals. And I think that's quite incorrect. What we should rather be looking at is looking more internally at our own measures. So how many people are working? What is the likelihood of the economy creating new jobs? What is the likelihood of the economy creating and maintaining new businesses? How are the existing businesses contributing to our GDP growth? Is GDP the only thing that we should be measuring? So we should also be measuring the cost of food. We have to take into account our productivity indexes, our consumer price indexes, because all of these things work together to enable our economy to function. And of course, in a country which has huge unemployment, you'd imagine that would be concerned with getting people into work. In a country that has huge inequality, you'd imagine that would be concerned about ensuring that we close this inequality gap.
All right, so we're questioning our reliance on their measures of our economic health, and if we did it ourselves, yes, it'll give us good indicators and good ways to manage. But I guess in the end, the lenders are the ones that rely on these ratings agencies, isn't it? So how do we start to convince that there could be another way?
So, I mean, the one thing is really to ensure that there has been the conversation over the last few months, hasn't there, about the role of the Reserve Bank and whether or not they could be expanding their monetary and fiscal instruments to make sure that our country functions in a different way, that our economy functions differently. So there's so many instruments that we could use in terms of interest rates hikes, and not only that, not only inflation targeting, but also allowing preferential lending rates to smaller businesses, because then at certain times they may need the cash flow. Even in our import and export regime, we don't necessarily always have to be compliant with the taxes that are used. So if we want to ensure that they avoid import surges on our key products and key sectors, we have the full levity to increase the import taxes to protect local sectors, local industry. And we don't use these sorts of instruments often enough. And I mean, I'm not sure why in particular.
All right, so we have a little bit of time. We don't know how much. They're supposedly giving us a reprieve. Is there anything that the President and his band of merry men can do to change the course of events, or is it too much to be able to fix in a short period of time?
Yeah, I don't know how merry that they're feeling. It's a difficult situation to be in. I think the Eskom situation is one thing that would alleviate a lot of the tension for all of us. I mean, domestically, and as well as for lenders and whoever else is gazing at us. Stabilizing, for example, our fuel prices is another thing that would probably be very helpful. And I think coming into election year, we need to have an indication of exactly how many jobs could be created. So, I mean, I think that we saw that in the last quarter, about 90,000 or 87,000 jobs have been created. What we hope is that this is a trend that continues, and that in so doing, that the economy doesn't lose jobs, because for every job that is gained, there's also attrition in the labor market as well. So those are the sorts of things that the state and the government has to ensure that they equalize. But this doesn't happen. This hasn't happened quickly, as you rightly say, and it also didn't only, these problems didn't begin with President Ramaphosa. And unfortunately, economic tides do take time. It also needs a whole reconfiguration, I think, of government policy. Trickle down clearly has not worked very well for us.
All right, perhaps as a final question, is May 8 a line in the sand that people are waiting to see what happens and how the chips will fall before they make the next move?
Probably. I would imagine that. I mean, internationally, South Africa is a very important economy. It's still a gateway economy into the rest of the African continent for our sins. And so I suppose that a lot of international players, as well as the rest of the continent, by the way, counting as part of the international players, would be very interested to understand how then the politics and the economy of this country look after May the 8th.
All right, Lebohang, interesting ideas about how we should be measuring our economic health, and also how other institutions such as Reserve Bank perhaps could join the fray. Thanks so much indeed for your insights today.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to take a quick